Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and updated in modern audio standards. This particular story is called Children, written by Weirdo5255. Curling up on the ground, I focused on moving my plates into the defensive positions. It was hard, though. I hadn't fully hardened them in my last molt. The normally solid chitin was weak and malleable, like wet paper unwilling to move into place. Hunkered closer to the ground, I let out a low keen of distress. The Queen had told me to make the calls while at school, but I couldn't stop the notes from tumbling out of the throat and mind. I didn't have the same amount of control she had. "See," cried Human Ken. He stomped down on my back. I heard the small plate crack, and I whimpered in distress, my keening growing louder in the air and my mind. "The bugs aren't so tough." Reaching down, the Human Ken grabbed two of my claws. I tried to curl up again and protect myself, like Mother had told me to do, but I couldn't. The Human Ken was so much larger. I was only the size of a small animal they called cats. The humans lifted those creatures from the ground all the time. The Human Ken roughly turned me in his hands, then leered at me, and grinned and displayed his teeth. I whimpered. It looked like he was going to try and take a bite out of me. "Let me go," I whispered, making sure that I was moving my vocal cords and not the words of my mind. The Human Ken laughed and tossed me up away from himself and the ground. Tumbling through the air, I tried to step my wings out, but I had only just started to grow them out. In the heavier gravity of Earth, even the Queen had difficulty taking to the air. The human Mark grabbed me out of the air by my pedipalp. It was the last part of my body that still had the old skin on it. With his rough grip in the heavy gravity, he tore the skin off, and I fell roughly to the ground. I immediately curled up on myself, trying in vain to lock the plates of my back together again. If I could do that, unarmed humans wouldn't be able to harm me. The roughly exposed pedipalp dropped in pain, and I let out a shriek through my mind. The Queen responded. She sent a brief image of herself moving away from the table of humans she was at. "You! What the heck is that?" asked the human Mark. He dropped the skin in front of me and stomped his foot down on it to make the old skin crunch. "It's shedding," said Human Ken. He stooped down and examined my skin, his face contorted with disgust, and he poked at it with a finger. "My dad told me about this. They've got armored skin. If you want to hurt them, you've got to peel it off first. They've got natural armor." The Human Ken snapped his eyes to me. "We can peel a few layers off of it. It'll feel that. I'll bet that none of the stuff that we've done yet has hurt it." I flipped myself up onto my claws and tried to run from them. He was talking about the warriors. They had the many layers of protective armor on their bodies. They were the ones who were supposed to fight. I only had layers to protect myself from the environment, and after molting, if they forcefully removed another. The Human Ken grabbed my back claw, nearly wrenching it from its socket. "Asshole!" shouted another human voice. I moved my eyes up in time to see another human. It was a male like the two attacking me, but its aggression wasn't focused on me. The male human, who was smaller than both of my attackers, rocketed over me, ramming his bulk into the Human Ken like a warrior would when ramming a barrier. Both humans collapsed to the ground. Keeping one stalked eye on the two humans, I ran towards the closest wall and quickly scaled it. Unimpeded, I quickly crawled the 7 meters up to the roof of the school. Looking down from my perch, I watched the humans. Human Ken had another human on the ground beneath him, pinning him down with his greater mass. Able to take stock of the situation from a safe distance, I looked at the third human. It was Human Henry. The teaching human had paired him with me during class. Human Henry had tolerated me, and we had completed the task that the teaching human had assigned to demonstrate learning. "Bug lover," growled Ken. He slammed the fist down onto Human Henry's face. Human Henry struggled and brought his own hand up to slam into Henry Ken's chest. "She didn't kill anyone," shouted Henry. I was so intent on watching the two humans fight, I didn't notice the rock until it flew past me and hit the roof. Following the trajectory, I saw Human Mark glaring at me from the ground, another rock in hand. "Come back down here." I narrowed my stalked eyes at him and knelt on the roof, folding my claws beneath me, minimizing my size. My blades would be able to deflect small projectiles, the building covering my vulnerable underside. "What do you think you're doing?" shouted another human. I and the smaller humans below all turned to see Human School Mother burst out from the building. Her hair was no longer bound to her head, instead streaming back as she moved towards the two human males struggling in the dirt. Human Ken quickly stood. Human Mark dropped the rock he was holding. Human Henry remained on the ground, wincing and muttering in pain as he brought a hand to his face. The human schoolmother walked right up to human Henry. She was only slightly taller than him. Her age and subspecies did not grow very large. The human Henry still cowered under her gaze. "They were bullying Desert," muttered human Henry as he slowly sat up. His face was colored black in places, but otherwise he looked unharmed. His soft chitin hadn't been breached. He pointed up to where I was still up on the roof of the school nest. Human schoolmother's face went pale, and she quickly turned to look at me. "Desert, are you all right?" she asked, her voice shaking. Unfurling myself, I moved to the edge of the school nest. "I am fine. No permanent damage was inflicted." Snapping my wings out, I jumped. The human schoolmother let out a yelp as I leapt into the air. "No!" Human Henry grabbed the human schoolmother's waist, making her pause before she moved to try and catch me. "She can land on her own." Hitting the ground, I folded my wings back under my plates and shifted to look at the human schoolmother. She leaned down towards me. "We need to contact your mother. The diplomats, the parents of the children who are doing this. I can assure you that they are not going to go unpunished. But this is a delicate situation. Do you understand, Nahen Tezet?" "Nalhina Tezet," corrected human Henry. I cocked my head to the side and shifted my wings to indicate understanding. Human Henry caught my gesture and translated a moment before I did. "She just nodded," he said. "Yes, human schoolmother. The Queen has already been contacted," I reiterated. She turned pale, her life fluids moving from her own face. "Already?" She didn't finish her sentence as a hum of anti-gravity field suddenly dominated the air. All three of us glanced up to see a light cruiser, still glowing in its re-entry into the atmosphere, screaming through the sky directly above the school nest. Alarms began to sound, even as the vessel slowed to hover above us. The humans had described our vessels as oblong eggs. Compared to the rough geometrical shapes of their own vessels, I'd always thought our ships were more aesthetically pleasing. Then again, they were required to move in and out of atmospheres, unlike the human vessels. Several bright red-yellow flashes around the cruiser heralded the incoming teleportation of humans' atmospheric fighters. I sent a quick questioning thought to the Queen. She ignored it. Her own mind focused on dealing with the several humans who were now yelling at her in the room where she had only minutes ago been peacefully speaking with them. She sent an image of their fear in their eyes. A fearful human was a dangerous human. The expression matched the one the human schoolmother had on her own face now. The bottom of the cruiser opened, and several forms quickly detached themselves from it. Seeing through the eyes of the warriors as they dropped, I directed them to land behind me, away from the humans. The thickly armored warriors adjusted their trajectories moments before hitting the ground. The cruisers had actively fired its engines to retain speed as it entered the atmosphere, ablating away most of its armor in the process. They jumped so low that with my order to redirect, they couldn't slow themselves. The warriors, each of them nearly 1,000 kilograms by the humans' method of weight measurement, and just over 2 meters in height, hit the thin artificial rock behind me. The surface cracked and splintered away. The human schoolmother let out a shriek and stumbled backwards away from me. Losing her balance, she collapsed backwards, her unstable 2 legs giving out. Human Henry also let out a shout of surprise. Taking several steps back, he twisted his body to run, eyes locked on the warriors. I huddled down towards the ground, ensuing the order that the warriors wait as well. Closing my eyes, I tried to suppress the image of human Henry's terror, his terror as the warriors of the Tahi once again stood upon the earth. Shaking off the feeling of human teleportation transport, I clicked my wings in irritation, and the representative Bay continued to talk. "I mean, by your own admission, this was the act of children. We can understand why you did this, but the response needs to be proportional." Ignoring the human, I continued moving down the path towards the entrance of the school. Human teachers, who had looked on our direction as the teleportation completed, and away from the cruiser in the air, stood rooted on the spot as I moved towards them. "Bye," growled Major John as he kept pace with my head. "I mean, this broke nearly all of the protocols that we laid down." "Bye," repeated Major John. "What? Shouldn't we be escorting the Queen to her daughter?" I wiggled an eye stalk at the human in appreciation. He was one of the few humans I liked. The politicians treated me as if I were human. The warrior simply provided information when I needed it and tried to think like me. He needed to do so if he ever felt the need to defend his planet from us again. "I apologize for breaking the protocols. My daughter felt that she was in danger, and I reacted." Tilting a stalk up at the ship that was still hovering above, I sent the thought to the commander. He lowered the inhibitor field, and I paused as Major John opened the door to the school for me. "The inhibitor field is down. You may teleport the ship if you are distressed." The engines are still cooling, and it'll not be able to climb back into orbit for another 3 hours. Major John raised his eyebrows and nodded once. I'll pass that along. I don't think we'll need to do that, though. Do you, Pi? The other human blinked and shook his head, side to side. The glow from his eyes that had denoted his implants being active cleared. No more than 3 hours. There is some panic right now, but civil protection hasn't reported any rioting. I waved an eye stalk at the human and granted access to the building by Major John. I listened to the stream of thoughts that Tezet was sending in my direction. Following them, I moved through the halls of the school buildings towards her. Humans, young and adult both, looked out of the classrooms as I stormed past them. Sparing a stalked eye in their direction, I watched as most of the adults recoiled away from me, and about half of the young. The other half of the young looked at me with eyes of confused curiosity. They were human, but the look in their eyes was identical to Tezet's. Reaching the room where I knew Tezet was, I carefully raised a claw up to the handle and opened the door. An older-looking human teacher glanced up at me and let out a small yelp. She stood up, and her eyes shot to the warriors who were standing in the center of the room around Tezet, and a human child that had purple coloring on one side of its face. Both looked up from the holographic sphere in between the two of them. I sent a quick thought to the warriors superseding Tezet and ordered them to stand aside. One warrior hesitated, the one behind the human child who Tezet had directed to protect. She fought with me for a moment before nervously shifting her wings and releasing the Tehi. The warrior moved away, heeding my order. The human child looked me over and grinned. Is this your mom? Tezet bobbed her head up and down in an approximation of a human's gesture. She is my mom. You're going to get that big? Eventually. The human child stood up and put both his wrists in his head, keeping his hands pointed up towards the ceiling. Carefully, he lowered one towards his face and tried to bend the other back towards his head. Hello, I'm Henry. I blinked, unsure what the child was doing. Henry? He grimaced and glanced back at Tezet. Did I mess it up? Tezet wobbled. No, but they don't really look like eye stalks. The movements would have been a standard greeting if the human had eye stalks. He'd been trying to say hello with his meaty claws. Raising a claw from the ground, I extended it towards the human child, their standard greeting. Hello, I'm Queen. The child's smile returned. He carefully took the claw with both hands and shook. Representative Pi and Major John both entered the room in time to see the child releasing my claw. What? Spluttered Pi. Major John raised an eyebrow at me. It was the first time I'd shook hands with a human if I thought about it. It was impolite for anyone to touch a queen, but the Henry had tried to greet me appropriately first. Major John turned to the very nervous human teacher. Mrs. Prince, we've all been briefed on what happened here. But could you tell us in your own words what happened? I turned an eye stalk towards the teacher, and she nervously fidgeted, her eyes moving between me and the Major John. Well, I only caught the tail end of it. Ken and Mark were bullying Tezet, calling her what we're not supposed to call Tehi, trying to step on her and stuff, said Henry. The humans in the room all focused on him. I hadn't moved most of my eyes from him. And they threatened to peel off her armor. I don't actually know if they could have done that. I've tried getting them to stop before, and they always just push me around when I do. So, Henry scratched his head for a moment. I kind of just tackled them. Dad always says the element of surprise is the best thing to have in battle. Tezet went up to the roof, and then Mrs. Prince stopped Ken and Mark. Henry turned to look out of the window. Then the cruiser came, and the soldier Tehi jumped out. That was cool. Mrs. Prince cleared her throat. That's the same thing he told me. She glanced at the warriors. The two other boys are in the principal's office at the moment. I tried to convince Henry here to see the nurse, but I'm fine, said Henry. Major John took several steps forward to the human child and knelt. He grinned and tapped the side of his face. You've got quite the shiner. Henry touched the purple spot on his face and shrugged. It's fine. The Tehi wouldn't let me get near him, or Tezet, said Mrs. Prince. I turned my eye stalks towards Tezet, who immediately hunkered down her wings, going still only a single eye on me. Representative Bai stepped in between us. Queen, we are going to need your assurance that nothing is going to happen to the boys who did this. They'll be punished for their aggression towards your daughter, Bai. Representative Bai, I cut the human off. I have no intention of harming children. Poor decision-making is a common denominator in both species. Tezet seemed to shrink even more, her eye stalks falling in sequence until only one was looking up at her. You sent the cruiser, she whispered. I did, which was an error on my part. Why was the warrior not allowing the human Mrs. Prince to treat Henry? She shifted underneath my gaze, and Henry let out a breath. I'm fine, he repeated. He said he was uninjured, And he said he was protecting me. Mrs. Prince wanted to take him away. I moved an eye to the older human teacher. She nervously swallowed. Did the warriors harm you? Threaten you in any way? She shook her head. No, they just wouldn't move. Human schoolmother is nice. I would not have harmed her, said Tezet. I ruffled my wings in irritation. At least you had some sense. You, however, are not human and in the school. You are not in charge. You are learning from the humans and must follow their rules. That means the human teachers are the ones who give commands. I leaned down towards her. Which means... Tezet shifted again, not saying anything. Henry stepped over to her and put a hand on the back of her wings. Tezet shifted them and moved an eye stalk to look at him. I should have let the human schoolmother treat his injury. You should also apologize to her for threatening her with the warriors. Even if you had no intention of harming her, humans have a very valid reason to fear us. Tezet moved another eye towards the teacher. I'm sorry for scaring you, Mrs. Prince. Mrs. Prince quickly nodded. You're forgiven. Moving back from her, I looked back at the two human representatives. Is this matter resolved? Major John inclined his head. I believe so. Representative Bai frowned. We still need to smooth most of this over. You're going to have to draft a speech or response that we can disseminate. I twitched my wings in agitation. But he was correct. All the Tehi in Seoul were already aware, but the humans did not have the same luxury as a near-instant communication. Their technology was bridged that gap, but their militaries kept most things secret. They will do so. Queen, said Tezet. I moved to stalk back to her. Tezet, I want Henry to be my first death. I slowly moved all my eyes onto her, stunned for a moment at her request. I had no right to deny her the request, but then he was human. I had no dominion over him, and I wasn't sure how the humans in general and how Henry would react. Tezet, I cannot deny you, but Henry is a child. We will need to consult his parents, and he is human. Tezet perked up and she partially unfolded her wings in excitement. I know he's a human. Deaf? Asked Representative Bai. I thought for a moment, trying to translate the meaning into human language. She wishes for Henry to marry. I think that is the correct word. The room went silent. Henry glanced down at Tezet, his face scrunching up. Married? I haven't even kissed a girl before. Shaking away the feeling of the teleportation, I quickly focused on the slight bug in front of me. She was instantly identifiable as the Queen. She'd been on enough broadcasts for me to pick her out, small compared to the one warrior in the corner of the room who was a tank of a biped. She was still nearly twice my size. Greetings, father of Henry, said the Queen. I licked my lips. Hello? A small form in front of the Queen wiggled, and I glanced out at it. Henry broke away from me and ran towards the Queen, and the smaller version of her did the same. There had to be Tezet. Henry, said Tezet. Henry dashed forwards and slapped his hands in the claw Tezet raised up to meet his. Tezet, the two children smiled. Or Henry smiled. Tezet waved his stalked eyes on her head around. Henry quickly looked away from his friend, eyes moving around the ship, taking it all in. I flicked my eyes to both sides, taking it all in as well. The bug ships weren't organic, but they did have a more natural feel to them than anything humanity had ever built. Rounded corners and soft lighting permeating it, a stark contrast to the sharp edges and bright lights of human vessels. Still, the underlying logic looked the same. The one corridor I could see was perfectly straight, with panels for easy access on the walls, the lip for the bulkhead door clearly visible on the floor. The color scheme was skewed more towards shades of brown and blue, but otherwise almost like a human ship. Dad, say hi, said Henry. I blinked and glanced right. I turned my eyes back to the Queen and raised a hand. Hello, I swallowed and shook my head. Bai gave me something to say, but I can't for the life of me remember it. The large bug shifted and extended a claw. I closed my eyes for a moment, suppressing the other claws like that I had seen. I took it and lightly shook. If you have forgotten the prepared words from Bai already, that's the reason enough for me to like you, said the Queen, her voice in a low rumble, but still almost identical to the voice of a woman. The bugs could emulate our speech, and sounds far better than we can make their clicks or songs. I'm going to show you Henry the ship. Can I do that, Queen? Asked Tezet. The Queen shifted and moved her eyes to look at me. Can they? I can promise they'll be in no danger. I nodded. Yes. Henry, behave. Henry scoffed. I'm not going to break things. Can we see the cannon first? It's this way. Tezet scurried off across the metal plating towards the bulkhead door to the right. Another bug standing near opened the thing, just in time for the two to jump through it and into the bowels of the ship. I felt my stomach clench into a small knot of fear. as Henry disappeared. Blinking, I brought up a small display in my contact implant, showing me the ship to his view as he ran through it. He agreed to openly broadcast through his eyes while we were on the ship. Putting the screen up in the corner of my vision, I pulled at the tie around my neck, loosening it slightly. The Queen's wings shifted around, and she pointed a claw at another door. I thought that we could speak in there. I have human furnishings and refreshments available. I nodded. Right, that sounds, that sounds good. Another bug opened the door, and the Queen slowly moved towards the entrance. Following her, I looked around the room. A few chairs were set up around the large table that was laden with food, all of it candy and the junk food variety, cakes, sealed packages of chips, cookies, and other things. The Queen moved into the room and settled her bulk down onto a small pedestal. She straightened up slightly, exposing some of her vulnerable underside, freeing an additional 2 pairs of claws to manipulate things around her rather than walk with. Tessa informed me that these foods are your son's favorites. You raised him. I thought that you would have similar palate. I chuckled. Well, that explains it then. Reaching down to the table, I plucked a small candy bar out of the stack that was nearly a meter tall. These types of things were my favorite when I was his age. They're unhealthy, but enjoyable. Putting back the wrapper, I took a bite and glanced at the chair next to the Queen. I could sit anywhere around the table. There were more than enough chairs, and she was tall enough that even with the stack of sweets, we'd be able to see another. Oh, then would you like me to procure something else? Your government had furnished me with the use of a teleporter. I can request something more appropriate. I shook my head, and taking another bite of chocolate, steeled myself, and pulled the chair out from the table directly beside her. We sat in silence for several minutes. I took another bite. The Queen twitched every so often. In the corner of my vision, I watched Henry and Tezet as they entered a larger chamber of the ship. Wires and control panels covered every surface. The bugs in the room, several of whom were on the walls, all turned to look at the 2 smaller creatures. Human children have 2 parents, don't they? Asked the Queen. I glanced up at the bug. Her eyes were twitching from side to side, focused on me. His mother died a week after he was born. The Battle of OKC. I took another bite of the chocolate. The Queen said nothing for several minutes again. I took in a breath. What does being a deaf mean? Representative Bai tells me that it's the first translation of marriage is incorrect. Describe what it means. I'm assuming your daughter isn't asking my son to lose his hearing. The Queen uttered a low warble. I wasn't sure how to interpret it, but it sounded like a chuckle of sorts. If he were Tehi, that would be accurate in a sense. The deaf are those whom the young Queen will cut away from herself, members of the hive who can no longer hear her will, only her words. They are the strong and the wise, who become her advisors for life. I frowned and looked up at her again. The Queen's eyes were still on me, but she was slowly collecting her stalks into 2 groupings, almost like she was trying to approximate a human gaze. They're not part of the hive. No. I took another bite of the chocolate. Why cut them from it? If the Queen needs advisors, wouldn't it be better to be able to read their minds? The Queen shifted, and her wings twitched. We do not read minds. Those in the hive are an extension of us, and a separate part at the same time. Every Tehi of the hive is me, but still independent. Should this body in front of you die, they would still live and be whole, but diminished. She twitched and reached out and took a chocolate bar from the table. Considering it for a long moment, the Queen shoved the entire thing into a maw, wrapper and all. Humans laud their individuality. Can you not see the advantage of a deaf? I only had to think of it for a moment. Different perspective. The Queen chirped. Exactly. Queens, long ago, before we took to the stars, had no deaf. To understand aliens, we needed different perspectives. My eyes widened. There are other alien species? The Queen ruffled her wings again. None that are still alive. We could not understand them. Most were like what we had been long ago. Hive-centric, uncompromising, expansionist, unfeeling. We have had to destroy them all. You are the first, not like that. But instead all deaf to one another. I'm still trying to understand how you function. I chuckled and crammed the rest of the chocolate into my mouth. If you ever answer that question, tell us. We're still trying to figure that one out ourselves. The Queen took another chocolate bar and ate it. I leaned back in the chair. I can't speak for my son. I want him to have nothing to do with you. I want him to hate you, Bugs, for the same reason I do. I took a breath. But, he never knew his mother. Never knew about the war. To him, it's, history. I heard her shift. That is the same for my daughter. She's young, but at times she knows more than I do. I smiled. Children have a way of doing that. I opened my eyes and looked at the Queen. If all your daughter wants is a human advisor, I won't say no. But in the same breath, my son is still human. He's still growing up, changing, learning. I am responsible for him, but I can't make a decision for his entire life. The Queen slowly leaned down towards the table. I watched as she settled some of her bulk onto it. She moved her eyes away from me towards the food. I also cannot make a decision for the future Queen. I can guide, direct, but she is one who is deaf and not. I can influence, but not order. I looked at the image in the corner of my vision again. Henry was looking back at the desert, and in the reflection of the panel beside him, I could see the wide grin on his face as he spoke to her about something. Let's have the two of them figure it out. You and I, we're too scared and set in our ways, don't you think? The Queen shifted an eye to me. Slowly, she moved it up and down. I suppose so. You would not object to your son being a deaf, then? So long as he's not forced into anything. I might not like it, but he doesn't see your daughter as a bug. The Queen straightened. Nor does my daughter see your son as a human, I think. I picked up another chocolate bar, breaking it in half and held out half to her. The Queen carefully took it from my hands. I considered saying something, but instead I turned my focus back to the small image in the corner of my vision, watching as the future unfolded. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.